Hey guys, welcome to the K Movement podcast. Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Shannon Chavez. She's joining us to discuss her background in the field of psychology and sex therapy. It's a very, very cool episode. I highly recommend that you listen to it. So thanks for tuning in. Just look out this week. We are launching our grass-fed collagen peptide powder, which we're really excited about. It'll be available on our website at knutri.com, and it will be available on Amazon Prime in the United States very, very shortly. So keep a lookout on our website and our Instagram for that, and hope you enjoy this episode.
Hi.
Hi, Dr. Chavez. How are you?
Meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I feel like this is our first formal introduction.
It is actually. We were going back and forth on email.
Yeah.
It's good to
Perfect.
face name.
Well, how are you today?
Good. It's just my day off, but I have a lot of random things that I'm getting done today.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you sitting down and talk with me. I heard your podcast recently with I believe it was Ashley on Muscle Maven, and it was really interesting.
Oh, good. Did you enjoy that? I've been getting some good feedback.
I did. Yeah, it was awesome, and it's a podcast that I don't hear often, and I don't think it's covered enough necessarily. And I think that might just have to do with the fact that anytime we start talking about sex, people get uncomfortable, and it's typically a taboo kind of concept for a lot of people. And I'm sure there's reasons for that. Some of it might be parental or things that run the family, or just maybe it's a personal preference. But I have noticed that it's not talked about enough, and it's a pretty important topic.
Yes, it is. Very important topic. I mean, every single one of us should be talking more about sex. So I was happy to see her kind of do a crossover with fitness and wellness community and sexual health. So that's definitely my mission, is to get the word out, even with people that may not be thinking about sex therapy or not too familiar with it.
Yeah, for sure. And like the first question is obviously, how did you get started, and what made you passionate about this field?
Yes, the magical question. How did you get into this work? You know, it always felt like a natural fit. I started my early career in college, graduate school, thinking I was going to go into medicine, and did a switch into psychology and realized that the niche I wanted to work in psychology was working with couples and adults. And I found that you absolutely have to be able to talk about sexuality to work with adults in therapy. So I started specializing in that work. I got into specialized training. I became a certified sex coach and a sex therapist, 2 different modalities, but both really, really effective. And it kind of grew out of that. So now my private practice primarily focuses on sexual health, even though I'm a clinical psychologist. So most of my clients are working on life transitions and things going on, mental health issues, but at the core of most of that is sexual health. So it's my main specialty area, and I love the work. It's really, really rewarding, and every day in the office, you just never know what you're going to run into.
Yeah, right. I was going to say the best part of that, must be that it is rewarding, and it's obviously something that you're passionate about, especially helping people. And I know, it's one of the areas that people struggle with the most because they're the most unlikely to reach out for help or get assistance with something that they may be struggling with. And do you find with that it's generally a small field of practitioners, and maybe it's not necessarily abundant like, other fields of medicine?
You know, I think it's growing rapidly, and I love that. There's a lot of people going into the field, not only as therapists, but as educators, counselors, different modalities and practitioners that want to focus on sex positivity and sexual wellness. So I'm excited about that. I feel like we're in this sexual revolution where people are saying, yes, I want to talk about sex. I want to help people heal. And there's so many different disciplines now that are specializing in this area. So I think it's an exciting time for sexual health, and the more the merrier. There's so many people out there that need help. So I think we're a good growing community, and especially out here in Beverly Hills where I practice, we have a really great group of people working in different niches and having different specialties. So that's kind of exciting.
Right, and that's also really important. I mean, my story might be a little bit similar to yours, but I initially wanted to become a dentist, and that was my path. And I basically turned down an acceptance to a pretty good school because I thought that there was maybe something else that I could be doing, and I found it more rewarding to be in the field of health and nutrition. I just thought that even though we know so much about fitness and health, people are still really struggling to get their health on track. And again, going back to what you just said, the more the merrier. If you're an expert in your field and you can help people, I think it's really important, because that's what issue a lot of people face nowadays. And so that's really cool. Do you see any practices or people that are coming into this, kind of like any other industry that grows? Sometimes people come in it for the wrong reasons. And have you ever seen that in your experience, where people kind of tap into it and maybe they provide misinformation, or they try to use this growing popularity to maybe make themselves money, or essentially do it for the wrong reasons?
Yes. All of the above. I always say that, everyone out there wants to be a sexpert, and they may have a blog or a site or some way to provide information. And I always just warn people that, people that do this work have to go through pretty rigorous training to become certified. And so even though someone may have an interest or passion for sex and talk about sex and want to teach sex, I really think it's important for consumers to be aware that working with a certified practitioner of any sort around sexual health is going to, provide a certain standard of care that may be different than what's out there. So again, I think there's a lot of advice and there's a lot of misinformation, and a lot of my work is actually working with some of that. So people will come in and say, I heard this, or I read this on Google, and or I saw this presentation, and now I have a lot of questions. So a lot of my work is kind of working with the myths or the misinformation. And so, again, I think it's important for people to be aware and to talk to and interview the people that you're going to be working with to make sure that their background fits with what you're looking for as far as treatment or therapy or services.
Right, of course. I totally, echo that, in the sense that if you're looking for something, make sure you do your research, and find someone that you truly trust, and make sure they have credentials, and that they are licensed to give out information before you approach them. And again, like yourself, I feel like there is that small responsibility that falls on your shoulders to kind of be a thought leader, and put out good information, so that when people have questions, you're there to answer them and point them in the right direction. Now, you might get this a lot, but when you're outside of work, do you find that your work life kind of follows you around, where people like to pick your brain, or when they find out what you do in public, like say on an airplane ride, or maybe they talk to you on the train, do they ever come up with a whole ton of questions and try to pick your brain as much as possible?
Yes, everyone. It doesn't matter what background, what age, where I'm at, what event. There's definitely someone that's intrigued by the work, and also may open up with their own sexual questions or background. I love it in a lot of ways, but there are definitely times where I may not want to open up that box. Especially, I find a lot of people have never talked about a lot of these topics. So on one hand, I feel really grateful that people feel safe and they want to open up. But on the other hand, it's difficult to do a mini therapy session in a public location. So, I definitely, what I kind of learned from people opening up so quickly about it is how hungry people are to talk about sex, and how much we either suppress this, or we don't talk about it, or we don't give us permission to go get help in the right ways. So yes, it's definitely something that I face often.
Yeah, and I totally understand that. I mean, my background is in nutrition, and I studied the ketogenic diet, which is growing in popularity now. So I find that when I go places, a lot of people will ask me certain questions about it, and I find that everywhere I go, every lunch, every dinner, every social gathering, it all comes back to this topic. And sometimes I love talking about it. I don't want to sound like a jerk, but it's nice to get away from your line of work, even though it's something that people are really curious about. So with regards to dealing with your clients, their questions or concerns, how big of a role, and I don't know if this is too personal of a question, but how big of a role do you see, religion and culture playing in your clients' inabilities to express themselves, like physically or even emotionally, to their partners?
That's a huge aspect of what people come into, either as a block or barrier, or wanting to figure out how to integrate in their culture and belief system that's so familiar to them with a healthy sex life. There's a lot of mixed messages around that and confusion around what's okay, and maybe even this idea that sex has always been about right and wrong, or what's acceptable, what's normal. I get a lot of these questions of looking for guidance around, what's okay to do, and how do we deal with things like shame, or a complete lack of sex education and upbringing, or negative experiences that happened early on in life that really shape someone's beliefs around sex. That's actually a niche area that I work in, conservative cultures and religious groups, because I myself am Latina. I grew up Catholic. I converted to Islam about 7 years ago. So religion has been a big part of my life. And so I talk a lot about how we can have more positive messages, even within these religious communities around sex, and even outside of sexual behavior, learning that sexuality is a part of who we are. So even if we're not having sex, we still have to be conscious about our sexual health and take care of our bodies and deal with all the changes that our bodies are going to go through, regardless of partnership or marriage, or some of the things that are part of a lot of more conservative religious belief systems. So it's a really passionate area for me. I really want to help communities that don't have resources and access. And I've been doing a lot of workshops in my community, my Muslim community, to provide workshops for women around sex, and they have been amazing. I've been so grateful that the community has been open to me doing workshops and coming in and talking about sex toys and lubricant and all these really important aspects of sexual wellness.
Yeah, that's great. And it sounds like you're doing a really good job at bridging that gap, which I'm sure is not easy to do, because I've seen people struggle with shifts in their mentality based on their culture or their beliefs. And it's definitely a difficult thing to overcome. Do you find, in terms of like the medical industry, that and again, I hate to keep comparing it to nutrition, but I find that, these niche fields are very, very important, because a lot of times, for example, you go to your medical doctor and you'll have some sort of issue, whether it's nutrition or sex related. And oftentimes there's a prescription that's given for some sort of pill that should, it's supposed to give you short-term relief, but it's never really addressing the root cause of whatever issue that you might be feeling. Do you find that, with certain issues that are sex related, that medical doctors are opening up to, referrals towards sex therapists rather than just try to treat something with a prescription medicine on the spot?
Yes, I think integrative medicine is definitely a big part of sexual medicine. So I usually work with a lot of referrals from gynecologists, urologists, general practitioners, people that may be the first stop for most patients when they're figuring things out, or they're noticing symptoms, or they're wanting to address problems. So there is a really good relationship there with referrals back and forth, even outside of medical doctors, people that are working in physical therapy, people like yourself, nutritionists, and holistic medicine. All these different areas are really great at working with sex therapists and people that may really help the mind component of the work, where they can focus on some body-based interventions, and then I can come in and really support some of the mental health issues that can be, that of course there is no magic pill for. There's no special medicine that you can take and things switch on. So I've been really grateful that practitioners are open to even hearing about how sex therapy works and how we can work together in a more integrated model.
Right, and I think the integrated model is the best model for anything, because obviously you're getting the best from every single field, and that way at the end of the day you're getting the best treatment possible. So I definitely agree with that. I think people probably make certain assumptions about who sees a sex therapist and who doesn't. Typically, the main demographic of clients that you might see. Is there like a mold that fits into the kind of clients you see, or is it literally every single, type of person you can imagine, personality wise, background, gender, or is it more clustered towards like a specific group of people?
It's all over the place, which is great. So people always want to know that. Who is the typical client that would go in and seek this work? And I see people from age 20 up to 80, and it's all areas of lifespan where people are coming in and addressing this work. And I've been really grateful to work with a lot of people that have never done therapy. So they are just going right into sex therapy. They've never done traditional therapy and have either read an article or found some resources and figured out that this is the right stop for them. So I think that most people that have started therapy are just at a point where they are at a loss. Maybe they've tried a lot of things on their own. They've read a few books here and there and have somehow found their way to sex therapy, which is great. Or have maybe heard something that I've read or presented and said, hey, this sounds like something that would really benefit me.
Right. And yeah, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, I think that goes in the same line as, seeing a therapist for your mental health. I think that there are certain things that for some reason have a sort of a stigma around them. And I don't see any sense in suffering by yourself when opportunities are available. And, suffering at the expense of, like you said, feeling like there's some sort of shame around seeking help. I think it's incredibly important for your overall happiness and just your longevity to be able to feel comfortable seeing a therapist for something that might be, a big struggle in your life and may lead to unhappiness with your circumstances.
I always tell people therapy is an intimate relationship.
Mm,
People come in and they don't know me, and we get to know one another, and
right.
we have a very collaborative relationship. So it's
Mm,
always about finding a good fit. Not all therapists work the same way, even in my field. So it's important for people to find a good fit and someone they want to build that relationship with.
mm,
Someone that they feel that either their approach or their background or their story, the way that they work, can really fit into what their concern is. So I always encourage people to shop around, call people, interview therapists, see who you feel comfortable with, ask a lot of questions. And so it's no one size fits all. There's definitely a lot of important research and preparation that should go into finding the right fit in therapists. So it's really an intimate space as well. I like to provide a very safe and comfortable, judgment-free zone for people,
right.
especially since a lot of people have never even been to therapy. So here they are. I'm
Mm,
in therapy. I'm telling you my whole sex history. I just met you a minute ago, and now
right.
I'm talking about the most private, secretive parts of my life. So
Right.
it's absolutely essential that you feel comfortable with who you're with and that it makes sense for you wherever you're at in
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, totally. Because could you imagine someone coming in and opening up their, their deepest, darkest secrets and not feeling comfortable at the end of the day? I mean, that might close up even more doors than they had intended to open when they came into therapy.
Right, absolutely. And this work is so personal as well. So there's things that we hear at times that can affect your own values or push your own
Hmm.
buttons. So it's really important that you work with someone. Again, this is that extensive training that we've all gone through to be able to be desensitized in a way, to be able to have anything come through the door in someone's story and be able to work with it without having a reaction, and to remain really positive to help that person find the right path and resources to healing. So I think that's also important. I've heard unfortunately, a lot of stories of people going to a therapist and not having a good experience. Either, they had a judgment or imposed their own values. And so
Yeah.
I can really do a lot of damage for someone who's opening up and really wanting to heal, and then feeling, shamed in a session or judged or given advice in a way that just didn't really belong. So that, I think, is something that I hear a lot about, unfortunately, even outside of the therapy world. I went to a
Hmm.
medical doctor and they minimized my experience, or they told me to
Right.
just, drink a glass of wine and relax, or, these horror
Yeah.
stories of what people have had to
Yeah.
go through being vulnerable and really asking for a professional's help. So I'm very mindful of that, and I want to always create a safe, judgment-free zone for people to come in.
Right, and it's great. I mean, it's amazing to see that you're not just doing such a good job in your field, but you're being a leader for what good therapy should be, and what they essentially the gold standard of what it looks like, which is awesome. Now we'll dive into some more sex related questions. I've always been curious, because I know that sex and pleasure obviously plays a massive role in the long-term health of a relationship, and probably is extremely undervalued by couples long-term. But can you go into more detail with that? And is there, like, I don't know if it exists, but are there any like statistics with that role between pleasure and long-term health of a relationship? Are there studies that have, let's say, correlated numerically the number of times that you're physical with your spouse per week to the chances of having a successful marriage? Because I do know that people who are unhappy physically tends to stem into their relationship and can affect them emotionally as well.
Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of great studies on this, and I think what the studies have correlated is overall happiness and more quality sex. So it's not necessarily about a frequency, we're having sex X amount of times a week, but more about the quality of those experiences. Because if they're positive, if they are rewarding, if you're really connected with your partner, over time, that's going to support desire more than anything. Not just, all right, we're on the calendar, it's our day for sex, and let's have it be more mechanical around frequency, but more about quality. Are we trying new things? Are we exploring? Are we expanding how we experience sex together in long-term relationship? Because absolutely, relationships go through phases of less sort of waning away and intimacy increasing, companionate love becoming more prominent, and of course sex is going to change along with all of that, and we need to be ready to embrace change without being attached to the past, right? Well, sex at the beginning was like this and now it feels like more work. These are always barriers we're going to be up against, especially in monogamous orientations. So I think what we want to do is be creative and open-minded and know that sex is not just something we do. We have to create experiences. It's not innate. It's always a learning. So I always encourage my clients, no matter how long they've been together, to make sure that they're embracing it as they would like a creative outlet or hobby. Are you making sure you're skill building and learning and getting to know yourself and, accepting the changes that your body is going through over time. So it's definitely an evolution throughout an entire relationship. So we can't get attached to any particular outcome. We have to be more open-minded to, how can we evolve and change and expand where we're at more than anything.
Right, and that makes sense. I mean, you talked about quantity versus quality, and I'm sure there are people that they might have opposing work schedules, and they may not necessarily even see each other or have the opportunity to do that for days or weeks at a time. But focusing on quality time together spent obviously is really important. And you kind of addressed one of my other questions that I had, which was, is there a set standard of, the number of times you should be physical with your partner a week? Say you need to, be physical X amount of times. And you just said that it matters more about quality than anything. And I also heard you, make a small comparison, I believe is on your podcast with Ashley, between food and sex being like a craving versus an appetite. I believe, if I got that right.
Right. Well, I always talk about erotic menus because we have different mood changes, hormonal changes, all these physiological factors that are going to change basically how we engage with a partner and our desire, even our arousal response. So because of that, we need to be open-minded to having different ways that we're bonding with a partner. So I tend to think of it more as bonding rather than sex, because sometimes people's definition of sex is really limited. I'm thinking of sex as intercourse, and maybe I don't want intercourse, and I can't get in the mood for that, or it feels like work. But is there another way that I can bond with my partner that might feel connecting, exciting, relaxing, all these great things that couples can do even on a day-to-day basis? So some examples of that would be, I incorporate a lot of flirting and verbal communication, even nonverbal play, which can be, hugs, sensual touch, ways that couples are connecting without any expectation of sex. And what this does is it kind of builds our ability to feel comfortable with the partner. So when we do want to initiate a type of sexual activity, it doesn't feel like we're going, 0 to 60. We've had some really good bonding throughout the week, so it can feel a lot easier to transition into a sexual play space. So I think for a lot of couples, it's important to think of that, because often couples will say, we don't really kiss, we don't really touch a lot, but then at the end of the night, when we're touched out and tired, a partner's initiating sex. So it's really difficult to get turned on and excited when you haven't had any, foreplay, so to speak, around getting warmed up and comfortable in a place or even a space of connection with your partner.
Right, and that makes total sense. I mean, if you have, like a small fire, you can build on it pretty easily. But to try to create a big fire out of scratch, I mean, it's going to pretty difficult to get the wheels in motion. So all these things are really helpful, and I think our listeners are really going to get a lot of value out of this. You're bringing up some really amazing points, and I would say that what you said about nonverbal and maybe verbal signs. I think people overlook those, at least in my opinion. I could make the comparison to, as people get older, they're told to work out less and do less. And I feel like aging sometimes is a bit of a social construct. And I feel like that physical side of relationships is really similar to that. People assume based on stories they've heard that, when couples, the longer they date, the less sex they have. You see it in every single TV show and movie. It's like the running joke. But I really don't think that should be the standard or the norm. And I think that it's something that people tell themselves, and so it turns into reality, and then they keep feeding that cycle.
Yes, you are what you believe. So I'm actually writing an article called "Make Monogamy Hot Again," because there's so many myths about the longer we're in relationship, the more sex sort of, the fire sort of dwindles out, and that's not necessarily the case. I think we have to keep igniting passion and having fun with igniting passion. It doesn't have to be work. This is a place where adults can escape and play and be creative and do all the things that we might not have a lot of time and space to do in our day-to-day life. Play is a place where we get to use imagination and even try on a different persona and actually have fun with it, where it doesn't have to be the mechanics of sex, but more about the erotic experience, which can be fun, and that's going to help desire over time. So, wow, we had this great experience. It was unexpected. I got out of my comfort zone, and now I'm excited about the next time that's going to happen again. So I think it's important for people to think about, even long term. If you think that you're going to have a lousy sex life once you get married, then that's going to be your reality. So I always encourage people to set good beliefs around sex, good in the sense of positive beliefs that are empowering around sex, and not to limit yourself just based on media messages or things we see in film. The media is a major influencer of how we view sex, so we want to just be mindful that doesn't have to be our experience.
Right, and that's really, really good advice, especially for couples. And this question, I think, is kind of interesting because, I've heard different things, and I haven't done the research on a research or journal level, but I'm just curious to see if, do men and women peak in sexual interest at different ages? Like, is there something that says, testosterone levels peak in men in their 20s, and then this hormone peaks in women's in their 30s? Like, is there a level, or is there any science to support peaks in sexual interest or sexual maybe appetite, as we just referred to it, or are these just kind of myths after adulthood?
It's been very inconclusive research about, where and what age is a sexual prime, because there's so many factors that play into that. So we could look at it strictly from a hormonal basis, and there's definitely times in the lifespan for men and women where hormone levels are high and there's a lot of cycling of hormones, and absolutely that can affect our desire, but it's only part of the equation. So there's so many other factors too, as you know, in your field, nutrition and wellness, and how someone's taking care of their body, stress levels. So it's hard to say, because if a person is taking care of all those aspects of their health, then absolutely their drive can be strong throughout their entire lifespan. But there are definitely ages where we start to produce less hormones that can affect, more than anything,
Hmm.
sexual performance and response. So it doesn't mean that it extinguishes your sexual desire, but it can affect maybe the time that it takes to get aroused. So this I
Hmm.
see a lot for males who are used to maybe more spontaneous erections when they were in their early teens and 20s, and then
Yeah.
as they get into their late 20s and 30s, they're noticing it takes a little bit more time and stimulation to get fully aroused. And sometimes it's coping with that and knowing that there's nothing wrong with that. It's part of aging,
Hmm.
and it just requires a little more awareness of what to do as far as sexual activity to support those changes.
Right, right. And my apologies if I'm jumping around here on topics, but there's so much that I have on my mind,
I'm
and I want to try to address it all before we talk for 6 hours. But it kind of goes back to just your relationships with your clients, and generally speaking, I know a lot of people deal with insecurities. Obviously, as humans, we tend to be insecure about certain things. And I'm sure that translates into the bedroom, insecurities in the bedroom, a lack of comfort, which I think is one of the biggest factors in having an open relationship or enjoying, the physical aspect of your relationship. How would you advise people to deal with certain insecurities that may occur in the bedroom? Say you or your spouse might feel bloated, or you don't necessarily feel comfortable or confident in your body that day, or that week. Maybe your nutrition hasn't been on point, and things aren't exactly going the way that you want them to be physically.
That's so common. I would say 100% of people are going to feel insecure around either how their body looks or not feeling so great. I think, again, this is tied to expectations. We have these high
Hmm.
expectations, right? Sex has to look perfect, beautiful, sexy, all these things that we see in media that just are not realistic. Sex is, realistically, it's just about being present and being comfortable, and sometimes being comfortable means letting go of the ideals around how we should look. And if it is coming up for someone, I recommend they address it first on their own, because again, your relationship with your body and mind is what's going to help you be present with a partner, and a partner is not
Hmm.
going to be able to break down those barriers for you, even if they're telling you you're beautiful, amazing, all these affirming statements. It's still about you to let go of those insecurities and realize that you're in charge of your affirming your body and feeling good about yourself. So I
Hmm.
do recommend a lot of exercises in my practice for when people are feeling insecure or self-conscious about their body that can help break down some of that barrier. Either reflection exercises, spending time in nudity, touching their own bodies, self stimulation, things that can help them feel more comfortable around certain acts and sex. And then also being open to communicating that, being able to tell a partner, hey, I don't want to swing from the chandelier tonight. I'm feeling a little, bloated or crampy or, not so
Yeah.
great in my body. And it's okay to communicate that. I think we just want to be open and honest with a partner and know that there are never any expectations, and it's not about pushing yourself into insecurities where you feel uncomfortable, but just being honest with yourself and a partner, and then finding other ways you can connect in those days where you're not feeling so great. So there's a lot of
Right.
options, and that's what I love about sex. There's so many opportunities for sexual connection that we don't have to be tied to just the familiar areas. We can think about, all right, how can we work with the days when we're not feeling so great and find other options for ourselves.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, we just talked about that briefly, which was, that it might not necessarily be perfect, but sometimes you just have to go with the flow, and accept that, it's not always going to be perfect or how you imagine it in your head. And you addressed, part of my next question, which was what role does a lack of communication play between partners in that decline in passion and pleasure? Because I think that it's odd that couples would get to know each other and be with each other for a longer period of time, but then the communication level in their sex life would be inversely related. The communication levels goes down in their sex life the longer they're together, which kind of seems odd. It seems a little bit backwards.
That's such an interesting point because I think couples are over communicating in a lot of areas and under communicating in some really important areas. So I always
Yeah.
tell couples less is more in all areas of communication. Sometimes we're
Mm.
talking about too many of the things that are not necessarily relevant for partners to be talking about. I
Mm.
always talk about the how was your day question, which is all about the loaded what's going on in your day to day rather than sharing something really valuable with a partner. And also,
Mm.
we can't possibly know everything there is to know about our partner's sexuality. That's
Yeah.
always a learning. I've been with my
Mm.
partner for 10 years and I'm still learning things about his sexuality. So I think it's always something we're learning, but we want to more than anything focus more on the ways we communicate sexually and what those tools are. It's kind of its own language. We have to be able to
Right.
describe our pleasure, what feels good, what we want, our desires, fantasies. So because there's so many aspects of sexual communication that's different than our day-to-day
Yeah.
communication, we just need to know how to describe it and to know that it is important. I also recommend that people take it out of the bedroom. We tend to have
Mm.
these talks after sex or in the bedroom. I encourage couples to have these talks over morning coffee in the morning, on a
Right.
walk, to normalize the fact that it's just a part of our life and it doesn't have to be this thing that we do behind closed doors and after there's a problem or concern, but also to talk about things that are going really well. Hey, the other night I really liked how you did this or that, or I love the way you smiled at me the other day. It really made me feel excited. These types of compliments and feedback are also a form of communication that can definitely improve for most couples.
Right. And you raise a very valuable point, which is not just talking about things that maybe you're not comfortable with, but addressing things that you did enjoy, which I think a lot of people tend to assume that their significant other knows or that they can just tell. But sometimes really just, I guess, saying like, hey, I really like that, and having that open communication, even if it's a positive thing, to just give that confirmation or, I guess, reinforcing that for the future.
Exactly.
Um,
Let your
yeah,
partner know, and then it also affirms it for yourself. Hey, I
yeah,
actually liked that. It felt good. I want
yeah,
it again. I like that my partner was, participated in my pleasure in this way. So it's
right.
helpful.
And I think, again, we addressed this next question in that too, which was kind of like the most common issues and obstacles that you tend to deal with your clients, and what they have going on between them and their partners.
Common issues, there's so many. I would say the most common is really desire discrepancies or lack of interest. Also,
Mm.
there's a lot of hangups around sexual functioning. So this could be
Mhm.
erectile functioning, women that aren't having orgasm, and a lot of distress around what's normal. Is something wrong with me because I'm ejaculating early, or I'm not experiencing orgasm, or I feel pain with sex? All these different areas, because we've heard a lot of these really unfortunate terms, sexual dysfunction and,
Mm.
hypoactive sexual desire disorder. A lot of them are diagnosable disorders we use in the field, but I also think they're very stigmatizing and pathologizing and shaming for people. And it sometimes adds just a layer of shame that we don't necessarily need. Rather than normalizing that, we're going to have functioning issues depending on a lot of factors, and most of them are addressable. So we don't want to look at it as these are big problems, sort of as a cloud over the relationship, but that things like this happen and there's a lot of ways we can address it. And it doesn't mean something's wrong with you. So I see a lot
Yeah.
of couples coming in with these types of concerns, either one partner or both partners dealing with a sexual functioning concern and feeling a lot of shame and shut down and just not knowing where to start. I don't know how we could possibly start addressing this because it's created so much discomfort and difficulty in communication in the relationship that we're really sorting all that out in the beginning of therapy.
Right, and I guess those problems, obviously, they're still big problems, but sometimes it seems like they get blown so far out of proportion that it starts to affect them mentally, and then it becomes a huge problem that is more difficult to address than if they just looked at it as what it is and how to kind of address it and move forward. Um, This next question is kind of interesting because I have seen some studies that looked at hormonal or mental benefits of sex, and then that goes into the next question of, say, when you're tired and you want to go to bed or you're stressed, sometimes the first thing that you think about is obviously not having sex, but getting some rest, or trying to focus on fixing whatever issue you have in your life that's causing you stress. But there are, I guess, studies that have shown that it can improve mood, it can improve sleep, and obviously going back to the quality of the physical aspect. Have you seen these studies before, and what's your take on the hormonal and mental benefits of being physical with your partner?
Yes, I think there's definitely both mental and physical and emotional health benefits of sex. There's so many of them. Sex is really the best medicine in so many ways. It helps not only hormone regulation, it detoxes the body, it's great for reducing heart disease. There's been a lot of great studies correlating just increasing your sexual activity, even from once a week to twice a week, and reducing the risk for a lot of illnesses overall, because it helps not only some of the benefits around mental health, but also our immunity. People that tend to be more frequently having any type of sexual activity tend to get less colds, flus. So it's really, really helpful for boosting a lot of our body's natural defenses just by creating, all the things that it does physiologically, good blood flow in the body, increasing, releasing, and even for tension and stress. It's a great stress reliever, which is often difficult because people will say, I'm so stressed, I'm not able to have sex. Yeah. Then sex is often the solution. So with that, and again, we're in a stressed out, fatigued society. I rarely meet anyone who said, I'm not stressed. So many people are dealing with stress.
Yeah.
And so I think even with that, it's about having activity that's going to be reviving and going to help boost energy. And we don't have to, again, be so focused on performance. So you don't have to have a marathon sex night with your partner because you feel like you have to. Think about being realistic. At the end of the night, is that really the best time for us to engage in a night of sex? I often encourage people to think about morning sex as a good option. We're rested, both men and women. Hormone levels are the highest in the morning as far as testosterone. We're well rested, so usually we feel good in our bodies. Again, there's some hygiene issues that people have about morning sex. I recommend taking care of that and then jumping back in bed and having some time with your partner in connection. So that does support a lot of the research out there when we, feel our best, mentally and physically in the morning, and then hormone levels again being the highest in the morning for both genders. So.
That's very cool, and that's very good advice. I think the mental benefits are definitely clear, just anecdotally, and I think the point that you mentioned about being busy or overworking, I truly believe that right now we're living in a culture of overworking, and everybody thinks they're too busy for everything. I haven't talked to a single person who doesn't think that they're really, really busy in their lives. And it's there's a lot of similarities between what you're addressing now and even something as related as fitness. Getting into the gym, sometimes you're going to be tired or a little bit stressed, and you always leave feeling a lot better. And sometimes you just need to show up and go with the flow, rather than worrying so much about the performance. People who are too tired to get into the gym after work. I know a lot of people have long commutes and they have really long days, stressful days at work, and then they can't get to the gym till 8 p.m. at night, and they've had a 12-hour day. Sometimes you just need to show up, and you will feel better afterwards. So it's cool to see the similarities between the advice that you're giving right now with regards to not worrying so much about performance and not worrying so much about I'm too stressed or I'm too tired, but just learning to have fun with it and go with the flow.
Exactly. Every little bit counts. So I even tell people, go home and have bad sex, whatever you think that is. Yeah. Because every time you do, you're gonna get over your own barriers. All right, we had sex, it wasn't perfect, but at least we did, and we feel better about it afterwards. We got out of our dry streak, so to speak. And so I think even that's important to say, every little bit counts. and even if it's a night where you're not even having any activity, but you're connected, you're cuddling, you're close, all of that can lead to more desire later on because it releases chemicals in the brain that help us feel bonded with a partner. We have a lot of physiological benefits just by closeness. So just lying in the bed and being close together can really help sex in the long run.
Yeah, totally. I think that would benefit a lot of couples. And again, this is a question that is a little bit different, but it's something that I'm curious about because I've seen the shift in our culture technologically wise. And, I was curious, how common is porn addiction? And do you see an issue with the abundance and even like the reality and you could say the quality of pornography now? I mean, they're coming out with things like virtual reality. And so, people who are growing up on this stuff, especially young teenagers, it's no longer out of a magazine. It feels real. And do you think there will be a long-term damage to the psychology of men and women growing up and their inability to kind of connect with a significant other when they're so used to these things feeling real but not being with a real person, if that makes sense?
I think pornography isn't necessarily the problem, it's how pornography is used. Because again, pornography is just a form of entertainment, just like anything else. So if we're going to say porn's an issue, we have to say that all media is an issue. How we're consuming it claims our consciousness. And it's not designed to be a form of education, even though a lot of people are using it to learn about sex, how to be with a partner, and isolating around it. I think with any electronics and technology now, it can create a lot of isolation to how we are, it's affecting how we socialize, how we find community, and that more than anything is what I find becomes an out of control behavior for some people. So I started browsing and watching, and now I'm isolating and spending more and more time. There can be an escalation of behavior, and now I feel I need it more just to get the same response. And we have the same issue even with food. I call these process addictions. So they're things that we use a mechanism or source to cope with things that we're not dealing with. And usually underlying a lot of compulsive porn use is anxiety disorders, early trauma, relational trauma. So there's things that are driving the need for porn, or porn sort of filling in that void, but it's not really a healthy source of using pornography as a way to maybe explore sex. It becomes a one-way mechanism for someone to get their needs met. And again, it's with an artificial source. So pornography is everywhere. There's a lot of resources and different types of pornography. And again, it's how you're using it that can affect you more than anything.
Yeah, and you made a really good reference to food. I mean, the same process and logic can be applied to the way that you eat and the fact that a muffin can be used or a muffin can be abused, and you can develop bad relationships with food and things that may not necessarily be bad, but it's the way that you again use and abuse it. So that's a really good point. Do you see, and I think this is an important question for young couples, especially as they move into that transition phase where they start to move in together, get married, and kind of move on to the next step of their life. Do you see marriage and or partners moving in together affecting their sex life? For example, you hear a lot about people saying they get too comfortable with each other because they're always together. And then are there things that still need to be kept private, or do you think that's just something that's specific between couples?
Yes, I think cohabitation has impacted sex quite a bit. And I think the reason why is that there's a lot of expectation around we-ness. Now that we're living together or married, there's expectations of how much time we have to spend together, how much we're sharing. And I think the one thing lacking for a lot of people that are living together is privacy, space to do whatever you want, going and do your own thing, even, being able to shut a door in your own home and have time just for yourself to do whatever you want, read a book, browse online. I think there's a lot of expectation to always be together. And what helps in the long term with sex is to have a little bit of distance so you can long and be excited about your partner. And also that you still feel a sense of independence in your relationship, so you don't feel that you're losing your identity. That happens a lot over time, is who I was in the beginning that may have been attractive to my partner, I've kind of lost a sense of who that person is. So now I'm not feeling great, not feeling confident, and that can come up for couples quite a bit on both ends, and that's something to just address. Finding your sense of identity in the relationship, even outside of who you are as a couple. And I'm a big encourager of time alone, and I think it's great for couples to think about, even outside of time alone, having social engagements that you're not obligating your partner to be a part of. Go have time with your friends, or go see that movie. It doesn't always have to be togetherness. Find the activities that you can do together that are the things that are unique and special to the two of you, but there shouldn't be so much, again, pressure to have this certain way that you live together and expectations around activities you're doing together, because that can affect how comfortable you're feeling and excited for sex overall.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you said that, because that's exactly how I feel about the topic as well. And I've been with my partner for 4.5 years now, and from the very beginning, from our first date to the second date and beyond, we made this conscious effort to not text 24/7 or go out on date nights every single night, 7 days of the week. It was a lot of excitement to see each other, which lasted for a very long period of time. And luckily, it's still there because we make time to see our own friends. We have our own hobbies, sports. And I think it's really, really important to have your own unique life. And then when you come together, then there's things to talk about. There's a spark, there's excitement in your stories that you share with each other. And since you weren't together every night of the week, 7 days of the week, you're not sharing the exact same stories because you were both together. So I think, having your own space, having your own time, whether you're moved in together or not, I think it makes everything so much better. And, I think it's counterintuitive. People think that in order to be happy, you have to be together all the time. But separating yourself and that time that you get to spend together becomes so much more valuable. And I think that couples would get a lot more joy out of it, if they had their own space and time away for themselves.
Right. Yes, absolutely. I mean, that is a form of self-care, really taking care of your needs and being able to do that independent of the needs being met in the relationship. So it's definitely,
I love that.
It takes some time to adjust to that. And again, there's social norms that get in the way of what's right or what's healthy or what the majority of couples do. And again, we can challenge all of that because there's it's uniquely what works for you. And I usually try to assess that when I'm working with a couple.
Of course, and that's totally normal. I mean, there's frustration, tension, comparison, and then I guess couples really develop into their own mold, which takes time, and that's the beauty of it, is that every relationship is unique, and that's what you get to share with your partner at the end of the day. So I love that. This is getting a little bit off topic, but I have some really unique questions based on the time that I listen to your podcast and things that I've seen. I kind of have just been jotting things down because I thought they might be, helpful to ask. But, what are your thoughts on couples sleeping in their own beds overnight? I know a lot of couples do that. And I know, a lot of couples just don't sleep well next to each other. I don't know if it's the dynamic, or maybe one is maybe a snorer, one likes it cold, one likes it hot, one likes a different temperature in the blanket. I don't know what it is, but do you see advantages and disadvantages of, maybe cuddling at night and then going into your own room and your own bed and really winding down by yourself? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I actually do that in my personal relationship. I'm kind of a raging sleeper. Well, I kick and, all over the place. And my husband, again, we just like different things. And I think sleep is so important. People are sleep deprived. They're not getting great sleep. We shouldn't compromise the quality of our sleep because of expectations. Couples should sleep together. It means something about their relationship. Absolutely not. Even as you said, that's my recommendation. Have your time cuddling or in intimate physical intimacy, and then sleep as a separate activity and make sure you're doing it the way you need to do it. So some people just need have conditions that they need to have in order to have a good night's sleep. Light sleepers, heavy sleepers, snoring,
Yeah.
as you said, people that like the TV on at night before they go to sleep. All of these conditions people may be used to and they're habitual, but it may really interfere with a partner's sleep. And if you have the means to do that or the space to do that, I think it can absolutely help in so many ways with sex and intimacy and just general wellness. Getting a good night's sleep. I hear so many partners that will say, I don't know the last time I had a good night's sleep, or my partner wakes up early and I'm automatically waking up early even though I really
Yeah.
enjoy those few extra hours of sleep.
Right. Uh, yeah, and I can imagine, someone that works a 9 to 5, and maybe their significant other is a nurse on a night shift. 5, 6 days out of the week, you're gonna wake up to their alarm, and you're gonna disrupt your sleep cycle. So, I'm sure that would play a huge role. I'm a big advocate for getting good quality sleep. I think that North Americans, yes, we're on a culture of being busy and a culture of being overworked, but we're also on a culture of not necessarily taking good care of ourselves. Putting good practices into getting a long, deep sleep, I think can go a long way. And most people are trapped in a really bad cycle of getting poor sleep, trying to compensate with coffee and refined carbs to kind of juggle them along the way. By the afternoon, they're crashed. They can't really get anything else done. They can't go to the gym and get on track with their lives in terms of being healthy. And then they spend time looking at a screen before bed, and that messes up their circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
I think there's so many small things that we could be doing to improve our sleep. And obviously, we just addressed one of them, which is if you're sleeping well with your spouse, good for you, keep doing it. But if you're not, then maybe it's time to consider what you could do, maybe without hurting your significant other's feelings, but being beneficial for both of you long term.
Right. It's not personal. Again, it's just about getting a good night's sleep. And even, investing, if you don't have the opportunity to have a separate bed or a separate place, to just invest in the bedroom. I think the bedroom is the most neglected room of the house, and a lot of
Yeah.
people focus on where people see, and they don't think about, the bedroom is the place for sleep and sex and connection. And so spending time making it that space that invites those things into that room. Get good bedding, make sure you have good pillows.
Yeah.
Is the temperature great? Is the lighting right? Do you have all the things in there? Are there distractions in the room that can affect your ability to feel really comfortable in there? So I do a lot of bedroom evaluation when I'm looking at
Yeah.
people's sex life. What's going on in the bedroom? Oh, we have piles of laundry, or we have all the kids' toys, or all of these distractive things in our bedroom that it just doesn't feel comfortable. I'm always thinking about all this stuff I have to do. So that could be a really good thing too. Let's make our bedroom an inviting space for intimacy.
Yeah, and it's odd how people are willing to buy things that would impress other people, but when it comes to investing in themselves, it becomes a difficult task that gets pushed off to the bottom of the priority list.
Right.
It's strange, but I think
I hear people say no one's going to see the bedroom, but
yeah,
it's about you and your partner. You're going to spend a lot of time there and make it great. Put things up that remind you. I always recommend objects that remind you of the relationship. So either photos of trips together, or objects that can be comfortable, that you like to look at. The colors in your room affect your mood, so all of that can impact your mood and feelings when you're in the room. So
yeah, and that's a funny argument that nobody can see your room, so it doesn't matter. It's like I hear a lot of people say, when they're with their significant other, it doesn't matter how they look anymore, so they don't have to work out or they don't have to eat well anymore. And I've always disagreed with that, and I continue to disagree with it because the longer I've spent in a relationship, the better I want to look physically, and I've probably over time gotten more dialed in with nutrition and fitness and stuff like that, because I think it's just important, and it's something that I think every partner deserves out of their significant other. I think it's really important to continue to do things for yourselves and invest in your relationships, even if it's something as simple as getting comfortable sheets that maybe you might spend a couple extra dollars on.
Exactly. Or even, even your own look. If we think about the beginning of the relationship, we have all these rituals around getting ready, right? Getting ready for a date,
Yeah.
greeting, putting nice clothes on, nice lingerie, all of these things. And then we sort of lose track of that when we get comfortable, as you're saying. But also, I recommend that people get ready for sex. Put on something amazing that you feel good in, and prance around in it for a while until so you get to feel
Yeah.
good in that outfit, and take time undressing one another. I think we take a lot of that for granted, and it's important that we bring those rituals back in whatever way. If you're not getting ready for sex wearing your best outfit, maybe you're taking a nice hot bath, stretching. I always recommend a lot of stretching before sex. Touch
Yeah.
your body, move your body before you incorporate all this activity that can really help with just getting you warmed up as you do before a workout, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We want to warm up before sex too.
Of course, yeah. That's awesome. That kind of brings me to, I guess this would be one of my last points, but I kind of want to tie everything back in together with nutrition, exercise, and how that relates to your sex drive. I want to hear your perspective. I know from my research, as a male, testosterone is very important, and one of the best ways to improve it is diet, eating good protein sources, healthy fats, not overdoing your refined carbohydrates, getting in cardiovascular exercise, and weightlifting. For me, heavy lifting has always been extremely helpful, and I think that I encourage people to not be afraid of lifting weights or doing cardio and fitness, especially dialing your diet. I think these things drastically improve every aspect of your life that comes back to your sex drive. Even getting better sleep, which can improve your recovery and your testosterone levels, and then the direct effects, obviously, of exercise. But I want to hear your perspective, what you would recommend for men and women, and if there's any research to support this specifically.
There's a lot of different research on, are there nutrients that impact our libido more than anything? And I want people to think of libido as energy. So there's no specific sexual drive or energy. It's about your entire, libido is our life force. So if we are eating foods that are slowing us down, or we're not taking care of our gut health and digestion, we're not going to feel great. I mean, that is our core center in the body responsible for our sexuality. So I always recommend, vitamins A through E can all support hormone production. Making sure that you're not eating a lot of processed foods. There are certain foods that are labeled as libido boosters, but again, it's because they are maybe highly nutrient dense foods. But I also think we also have to be mindful of things that we're putting into our bodies, like alcohol and substances that can also drain our energy or suppress our bodies versus boosting our energy. So, just like anything, you named a few, caffeine, some of these substances over time can impact our libido. And so it's like any other wellness plan. Healthy eating is going to make you feel great overall, and that's going to impact your sexual motivation. You're also feel good in your body. So body image is such a big part of it. If you feel good in your body, and you move easier. A lot of people are very sedentary in their lifestyle. So sitting all day at work, that puts a lot of strain on our pelvic floor. And, again, this is a part of our body that we're not exercising. People may say, I'm exercising arms and legs, but we're not really thinking about our pelvic floor, which is a big part of our sexual functioning, men and women. So it's something that we can be a little bit more mindful of. And then, again, a healthy diet is great overall. Every aspect of your life will improve with a good, healthy diet.
For sure. Yeah, I'm really glad that we could end it off there. The very last thing would be if someone wants to seek a sex therapist, what can they expect? How long is it typically in terms of sessions or number of weeks? And then finishing off with how they can connect with you, your website, your Instagram handle, and all that.
Okay, great. So sex therapy, there's an organization called ASECT. and asect.org, AASECT, and they have a directory of certified sex therapists throughout the country. That's a great resource to finding someone in your area if you're out of California. And also, a sex therapy session starts with an initial assessment. So you want someone that's going to look at your entire history. I know for my clients, we have an 80-minute session initially where we're going over forms and background and all aspects of health. And we're also setting goals in that session. And goals are basically a path for treatment. And then follow-up sessions are about a 50-minute session where we start to tackle some of the things we've identified as concerns and goals for therapy. It's more short-term than traditional therapy, and by that I mean it's more solution-focused. So we're not necessarily doing intensive therapy. A lot of it's skill building, resources, education, a lot of coaching, a lot of learning new things. So depending on what the concern is, it can be anywhere from 4 to 8 sessions on average. Some people and couples, it may be a more long-term therapy depending on what our goals are and what we're working on. If we're working a lot about past concerns and really digging into a history and relationship styles, that can be a more intensive therapy that may take a little more time. But on average, it is a shorter of a therapy than most may think. So we're working specifically on sexual health. And then also if there are other mental health issues, we're taking that into consideration as well.
Fantastic.
And then as far as getting a hold of me, my website is Dr. Shannon Chavez. I do offer a complimentary 15-minute consult over the phone. So if people have questions, they're not really sure if therapy is the right fit, that's an opportunity for us to meet over the phone, talk a little bit about what you're going through and seeing if this is the right path for you. And then on social media, I'm at Dr. Shannon Chavez. So I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and you can always find some fun and great articles, things about sex positivity. So definitely check out my page.
For sure. Okay, well, thank you again for joining us. This was awesome. I'm sure our listeners will enjoy it just as much as I did. And thank you for taking the time. I know it's your day off, so hopefully you enjoy the rest of it. And hopefully we'll connect soon.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
thank you.